like to welcome all of you and to thank Jennifer and Sherry for hosting this today and leading us through some very important information about this topic. I'm going to turn things over to Fiona Young for just a moment to take care of some housekeeping, and then we will turn things over to Jen and Sherry.
Hi, thank you everyone for joining us today. Just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded, and both the recording link and the PowerPoint will be shared with everyone after today's session. Right now, everyone's line is muted. However, during certain portions of this webinar, we will have Teams report out. So during these points, please be sure to unmute your phone line so that we can hear your examples and your feedback. If you have any questions at all during this webinar, please use the Q&A chat window to send in your questions and comments, and we will get to them throughout the webinar as well as during different Q&A portions of this session. And I'd like to now go and turn it over to Sherry and Jennifer for the webinar.
Great, well, welcome. We're so glad you've joined us for the second part of Selecting Effective Assessment Technologies. We're going to get started with just a quick review of what we presented last week, and then we're going to turn it over to our audience and ask you to share with us what you learned from last time, and hopefully share your taxonomy and any of the other work that you were able to accomplish over the past week. So as we promised, we were talking last week about a taxonomy, a process, and a rubric with the goal of finding ways to create connections across institutions essentially, we wanted to help you to classify technology tools, and that's why we asked you to go back to your campus and take a look at the technology tools and how they're being used, and we asked you to use our taxonomy to think through that. We also shared with you a planning process, and we'll run through those steps in just a moment to refresh your memory about the planning process that we created. And then finally, we looked at a rubric, and we've asked you to sort of provide some ideas of some additional criterion to help us evaluate technologies for specific uses. So you may recall our diagram of student learning and success, where we have our known systems, our unknown systems are the balls that are not labeled, and then the desire to connect the direct and the indirect evidence so that we can get a deeper, more nuanced picture of how students are learning, and then how we as educators can really support that learning as students move forward.
Then we talked about our taxonomy, and again, it's a strategy for classifying different assessment technologies based on their capabilities. And the categories that we looked at were the connecting, collecting, organizing, archiving, analyzing, communicating, and closing the loop. And we provided you with a sample of some of the assessment management systems that are provided by NILOA in their assessment management catalog, as I'll call it. They have a document that lists several of them, and what we did was we took the opportunity to place them in our taxonomy, with the stars representing that the different tools have at least one of the capabilities of that category, and a X representing that that particular tool covers all of the capabilities that we've outlined in that category. And again, we shared those documents with you that have the definitions across the taxonomy categories. And Fiona, if you could place that link once again in the chat for folks who might not have been here so they could access that document.
Right, and one of the key conclusions that we shared with you last week is that really none of these assessment management systems, none of these tools really meet all the needs that we have, and they don't necessarily address emerging needs for us either. So we wanted to bring that to your attention, and then also have you share your expertise with us about other systems and ideas that are out there.
Right, so essentially what we've done is highlighted the work that needs to be done in the field with regard to providing a more comprehensive tool, right?
And if you're wondering, Sherry and I have been busy taking this out to the vendors, presenting it, and we are starting to get a little bit of pushback from vendors as they try to argue that they are more they have X's, not stars.
More X heavy than they actually are. So what we showed you last week was just a subset of the tools we use at UMBC and where they fall in the taxonomy. we expanded that work a little bit over the week just as you were supposed to for your homework assignment.
Right. So we talked to the folks who were here. We still have a studio audience here. In fact, it's a little bit richer than last week. We have more people. We talked to folks afterwards, and we put what you see on the screen now are some of the ideas that that folks shared with us. For example, Sarah Bass, who's here again today, talked about clickers and how she uses that to collect student learning data. We knew that Brittany is in the audience as well. Hopefully you're out there again, Brittany, and she had shared with us all about the card swipe, and she has a wonderful poster that focuses on that. So these are some of the tools that we looked at. We really dug into Excel because at UMBC, we use Excel for so many things, and key among those is having the software that doesn't speak to each other. We can sort of pull it into CSV files and have them talk to each other through Excel. It's awkward and takes a lot of time, and no one really wants to do that, but it is at least a temporary solution.
Yeah, and we've presented a number of times on this, and we found that that's the tool that people keep saying that they're using right now, right?
Right. So we suspect you all are probably using Excel for a fair amount of that. And then, of course, we included PowerPoint and Word because without those tools, we can't really communicate and present the evidence about closing the loop. In fact, at UMBC, if you had the chance to visit the Faculty Development Center website, you'll find we have a closing the loop template in Word for people to use to be at least thinking about closing the loop. And if you're wondering why we put a star under closing the loop, we know Word doesn't actually close the loop, but it does give us some ability to think through and share the data with other people.
So now we want to give you all the opportunity to share what you did over the past week as you went back and looked at your particular tool set. And what we'd like you to do, whoever's speaking for the group, talk about who you worked with to come up with this, this taxonomy for your institution and what you found when you did that research. So we know that someone out there, if you in UMB, is ready to present. I'm going to mute myself and ask you to unmute and take over.
Well, hey everybody, this is Clark Shaw Nelson from the School of Social Work in Baltimore. How's everybody doing today?
And this is also Colin Fagan from the School of Social Work as well.
Awesome. Colin, would you like to take everyone on a tour of this?
Yeah, and just to kind of go over everything, my kind of main backing for being a part of this is our assessment and data collection for accreditation purposes. And we've kind of been using TK20, but we've been struggling to kind of get the reporting that we need. So I look forward to hearing everybody's ideas and what they're doing for the future. So we mainly use Blackboard for all our courses, and we do a pretty good job of collecting and organizing everything in there. As well, we have a database in our directory, and I think some of the challenges that we're finding is that all these different parts of our university has different data, and they're not all connected. And there's areas where some people are connecting data in the same type of data in different places, and maybe that's a waste of time. So I think just being able to talk about this will hopefully be helpful for us.
And I'll just add to that on this chart here, what you're seeing, so TK20 is, as Colin mentioned, how we are, the tool we're using to gather data on assessments and competencies that we're reporting out to about accreditation and so on. And that is, it's a plugin for Blackboard. It links up with Blackboard assignments, and it has the capability of having rubrics in there so that instructors can go in and say that a student has met or has not met a certain competency, and that data then gets stored in TK20 for reporting. As Colin mentioned, we've had some difficulties with the type of reports we need to generate, and that meshing with what we're getting out of that system. Banner is, of course, the student information system, so there's a lot of data there about students and what they sign up for, what they register for. Grades are handled in Banner, I believe. Target X is actually a fairly new system that's being used for admissions. So that's primarily for as students get entered into the school and so on. The field system that's homegrown is for tracking the students as they go out into the social work field and the things that they're doing in working with liaisons out in the field. So that kind of gives you a little overview of all these different tools.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. I wonder if you could go back and say a little bit more about the Blackboard TK20 connection. Are you saying that the rubrics are in Blackboard and then you pull them out through TK20?
Yeah, so we use TK20 to set up the rubrics, and we load the course rosters from the banner system, and then we put an LTI link within Blackboard. And the reason we did that was, we didn't want to introduce a new system to faculty where you have to go log in here, and by having the LTI link, they don't have to log into TK20. They almost think that it's Blackboard. They go in, they click the rubric, and assess the student and go to the next one.
Okay, so it sounds like you've embedded TK20 into Blackboard just to kind of meet faculty where they are and to streamline a little bit for them and make the process a little bit easier?
Yes. And I would say that part of TK20 is going well. It's more the problem we're having is kind of the reporting side of it on their end, getting the reports that we need.
Oh yeah, we completely empathize with that. We have one of our faculty members from the Department of Education here, Vicki Williams, and we've pulled a lot of reports from TK20, and they tend to come out on paper somehow.
Right, and I feel like we've started looking at other ones too, and when you first meet with an assessment company, they say, oh, that's no problem, we can definitely do that, and then they kind of don't follow through with things, and it seems
Or stop taking your calls.
Yeah, right. Like they're like, we're not worth their time or something, in a way. But
yes, we hear that message as well, and that might be something where as we think about pulling these challenges up to the system level, we might actually have a stronger position to push these vendors to do what it is that we need them to do. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I would say so without a doubt.
So how familiar are you with what the tools that the other schools at UMB use? Do they use the same set? Do you know if they have a different tool set?
So like for assessment data collection, we're the only ones at University of Maryland that use TK20. And some people kind of, or different parts of the school kind of do their own thing in a way. The only thing that kind of the University of Maryland, Baltimore does collectively would be like Blackboard and the directory.
Oh, okay. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but our TK20 in the School of Social Work is linked to I think it is your TK20.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of like, it's like a dual license, but I know that UMBC will not be renewing next year, almost certainly, and that I think we might be looking at other options as well. I think one of the ones we're looking into is, and I don't know if you guys are using it all, is the EAC rubrics for just our course-based assessment rubrics within Blackboard is one that we're kind of looking at as a potential suitor.
Oh, well, we can talk to you about EAC because we are using that, and it has some limitations, but it has some affordances as well.
Right.
And then this kind of seems like sometime back, MJ Bishop had proposed that we have a working group
Yep.
of people
Mhm.
coming together across the system to talk about these technologies, and it seems like TK20 and EAC and Blackboard seem to be some rich discussion areas for even just between our two schools, but probably other folks in the audience might also like to participate.
Oh yeah, definitely. We would definitely be interested in that.
Right. Does anyone have any questions for UMB? If you want to share them in the chat, feel free, or you can come off mute for a moment and ask questions. Have any questions? Okay, so hearing none, we'll go to the next. Thank you very much, UMB, for presenting.
Yeah, we really
Appreciate
appreciate your insights.
Yes, and for taking time to do the exercise.
No problem.
Okay, so next up is Bowie State University. I'm going to go on mute and let you take over.
Hi, Lynn and Becky. If you are going to be presenting on the slide, just make sure that you unmute yourself before you begin presenting.
So I'm not seeing Becky in the participant list. Who was the, Fiona, I missed, who was the other person you mentioned? I'm not sure they're on.
Lynn Harbinson. And Lynn, just in case, oh, there we go.
Yep, I'm here. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties. Okay. So I'll just go through what we're using, starting with Blackboard, which we do use for all of our courses for our learning management system. I think maybe most campuses, or a lot of campuses do. Taskstream is used by our College of Ed, and that is for student learning outcomes data collection. And Sedona is used by our College of Business, and that they use primarily for faculty credentialing and collecting that information in terms of tenure and promotion. PeopleSoft, I think everyone's familiar with that. Microsoft Teams in terms of collaboration and work groups, and then Starfish with tracking student performance, grades, and our early alert system. And that's mostly for retention coordinators, academic advisors, and faculty. And I guess that's everything.
We have actually a question in the chat from Towson, and they're wondering if you can address the cost of these items. You may not know that information, but if you have a sense of the cost of any of them, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the best one to ask, but I would be happy to take that question back and, you know, find out more and get back in touch with people from Towson or through you all.
Yeah, that would be great. Share it with Fiona. And we're going to share a Google Doc in a little bit so that we can talk about next steps. And that might be one of the areas that we put in there as, with regard to something we might want each of the institutions to kind of share, like what the,
definitely.
What the cost is for these tools.
Right, we got that question last week too, and we didn't really have that information at the top of our heads about how much they cost. So that's something that we're probably going to want to look at as a system. And if we're going to use any of these tools across multiple institutions, perhaps we could broker some type of a better deal.
Right.
Yep, that sounds good.
Any questions for Bowie? All right. So,
well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing and putting this together for us. I guess the Sedona sounds like it's like our FAR, our faculty annual report that we do through, I think we do that through Weave or
I'm not sure.
Task, yeah.
John?
John?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed it last week.
Oops, okay.
Could you distinguish communicating versus closing?
You want to give? Well, I don't have the. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. We'll actually give you, John, the
So communicating
handout.
is more like sharing
Right.
across the web, what
Right.
and in other formats, like what is it you want students to learn and what were the results of the learning. Closing the loop is when you actually take the data and apply it to creating an intervention to improve student learning. And of course, you'd want to communicate about that too. Yeah, so that's
Closing
the
the
change
loop
in
is
practice, and then communicating is because we really just want to push the transparency framework that the National Institute of Learning Outcomes Assessment has published many years ago, and they really want to encourage institutions to share with faculty, students, parents, boards, all the audiences, all the potential audiences out there, what it is we want students to learn, how we help them to learn, how we measure it, and then what do we do with that data in the end. So thanks for your question, John.
Yep, and we'll provide you with the handout that gives all of the definitions. All right, so UMUC, if you would be so kind, I'm going to go on mute while you present your taxonomy.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Kimberly Miller, Director of Assessment for UMUC's undergraduate school.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
You did a lot of work here.
Yes, and I have to say this is just representing the undergraduate school, and it's not an exhaustive list. The grad school, while collectively, and I'll try to highlight where we're both working on pilots or working with the technology, but they do have additional technology in the grad school. And as you can see from the list, there's no one technology that offers all solutions for evaluation of student performance. Just starting off, CourseTune is a curriculum mapping software that we're piloting currently. It allows our team of faculty and instructional designers to map out their curriculum and determine the assessment points for school and program outcomes. This captures decisions made in building the curriculum and the cadence and type of assessment used throughout the program. And I marked off analyzing because it can look at how outcomes are being infused across the program or across programs across the school. For the second one, I grouped Microsoft Word software with SPSS. These software packages are used to link standards with outcomes, manage the assessment schedules, integrate new and existing evidence, capture contextual information around the assessment, analyze, communicate, and archive the reports, or integrate closing the loop reports into our academic program review cycle. D2L is our learning management software. It collects learning and assessment data from multiple elements within the course. However, Rubric's link to problem solving, project-based assignments is the primary assessment used for evaluating student success of program and school outcomes. And I'll just back up and say that our school offers face-to-face, hybrid, and online courses, but most of our courses are online. We also use PeopleSoft, and this collects demographic student information that is used to support a deeper evaluation of student performance and outcomes. For example, since courses are offered to students in multiple programs, this additional information allows us to focus our analysis on a specific group of students, such as if we just want to look at a specific group of program majors. Business Objects is what we call Edwards at UMUC, and it's used to query data from our learning management and student management data systems so that we can gain access to data in the form that we need for analysis. We also use Taskstream Accountability Management System. This allows us to collect, organize, communicate, and archive our analysis by academic year, by program, by outcome, and by measure. This system also allows us to track curriculum improvement plans when performance falls below a desired benchmark and when one is needed. Also, we are currently working on analytics through Tableau. This is an interface that allows us to create visual charts, graphs, and dashboards on live data. It also allows us to access and download data for additional analysis. We're currently investigating Tecnologies and working with Hilo Campus to develop solutions to connect the data with specific learning outcomes. There's some dashboards that have pre-calculations for trend analysis, so it actually can analyze the data if that dashboard is set up to do so. Our institutional internet, we call Engage, is used to bring faculty together to develop authentic assessments, norm rubrics, and discuss assessment findings, determine next steps, or if an instructional improvement plan is needed. This is needed because our faculty are geographically dispersed all over the world. Portfolium is what I've highlighted on the screen is what I anticipate how we're going to use Portfolium. It's currently being piloted by both the grad school and the undergrad school, and specifically for the undergrad school, the RN BSN program. And this pilot is part of the USM BEST initiative to test digital pathways and link students with employers. So this is anticipated use. We're just building up the pilot right now. We're real excited about the use of e-portfolios. Civitas was a past agreement that was used to provide analysis for student success predictive analytics. And CM is Carnegie Mellon Open Learning Initiative. This was also a past agreement to provide and develop adaptive learning technologies to our students. This also allowed us to do a deeper dive into how our students learn, such as validating if low assessments support the high stakes assessments student outcomes. And I will just note that our faculty do miss these tools in their classes since that agreement's ended. The educational testing service, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. In the past, we used this to test our incoming freshmen and near graduating seniors to measure learning in areas of critical thinking, quantitative literacy, and written communication. These findings were not as effective as validating instructional improvement plans at the course level, so we've since discontinued using this service. And then this is not an exhaustive list, but finally, program-specific technologies such as Test Out, which we also call LabStim. This is just one example. We use this as a learning and assessment platform for cybersecurity and computer networking programs. Students complete lab simulations, and the results are used to calculate their final grade, find out what skills or competencies they need to work on, and to help prepare for further assessments for the students for like credentialing exams or certification exams. And this is kind of where we offer kind of plug and play options as needed if the cost is reasonable and the technology fits with the mission of the program in the school. I will just looking over this list overall, we do have a heavy emphasis on collecting and communicating, but it's the reporting that's challenging, and it's how we're getting the information out to different levels, different management levels, and if that information is useful. I see a bunch of chats going off as I was talking, so can I answer any questions?
We're looking over the chat questions
here,
right
yeah.
now. So while Sherry does that, I want to thank you for pointing to Portfolium as part of the USM initiative. Those of you who aren't aware of this, USM has created a contract with Portfolium, and they're allowing different institutions to try that out.
It's part of the badging initiative, though.
It's part of badging.
Yeah, correct. So most of the comments are around the Google Doc that I just shared with regard to being able to work, the next steps on this. So if you haven't taken a look at that Google Doc, you can sign on to that. We did get one question from Towson, hoping to address how campuses are dealing with the overarching connectedness of the different solutions. And that's kind of what we've been talking about. How do you get data integrated across the different systems? So
Right.
we'll open that up at the very end to talk about, when we talk about next steps, what people are doing and where there are gaps in their ability to have an overarching assessment strategy.
Right. I wanted to comment on your assessment of educational testing service. I'm curious to know if any other institutions used ETS for some of the testing, and if they found, and this is actually a national trend, what you actually just shared a moment ago, was finding that you use these tests to find out that students demonstrate gains in critical thinking or quantitative literacy and so forth. But what people are finding is just what you said, is we get those results, but we cannot thread those back to the specific programs because those tests don't give us that type of mapping capacity. We can't see what is the source of this either improved learning or lack of learning. So you really can't create an improvement plan unless you can drill down to the specific courses and programs where this is happening. So thanks for sharing those insights. We really appreciate it.
And you
Thank you. And you know what, Deborah McLaughlin, Lilia Roberts, they're both program chairs in the undergraduate school, and Gretchen Jones, the associate dean of the undergraduate school, helped create this presentation. So I want to thank them as well.
Well, wonderful. Thank you too. And I just had a follow-up question about the, when you talked about the Carnegie Mellon Open Learning Initiative, you said that's a past pilot and it's been discontinued. Did you say that the faculty were missing those tools and liked them? Or...
Yes, I believe they did really like those tools. It provided a lot of good feedback. One example is just they captured so much metadata on the different learning activities leading up to the final assessment that they were able to improve the curriculum and really at the time get real-time information to find out where students were having problems on the learning activities to influence and focus on the instruction in the classroom. And I believe we had to discontinue it because of cost, but it was a very helpful initiative.
Well, that's really good to know. We weren't aware of that particular software package, and if you're able to share any details on the Google Doc, we'd appreciate it. Just an understanding of why it wasn't feasible to continue using it, and then also to get an idea of what it was faculty liked about it, because whatever that is, we want in whatever new system emerges, because we want to make it palatable and easy to use for the faculty.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions for UMUC before we move on?
Okay, we've addressed everything in the chat, so. All right, part 2.
Right, so we just wanted to do a quick review of the planning process. We had provided these in handouts to you, and we went through it in detail last week. But basically, the idea of clarifying common ground, using backward design, and taking inventory. And it really does look like with the presentations we've seen from these 3 schools and then UMBC, many of us have gone and taken inventory and tried to figure out what it is we already have in place. We also challenged you to do the clarify common ground exercise. Yeah, that's okay. You can go to the next slide, okay, Sherry, and we'll take a look, because the other 3 parts of the planning process are identifying your audiences, which we've talked a little bit in the taxonomy presentation so far, seeking expert advice, which we're now doing with the broader audience, and then forming a team. So this was our planning process. We wanted to kind of roll back to the vertical alignment exercise that we asked you all to do. Many of you gave us feedback that it was challenging. And we have some folks in the studio audience here who tried to do that work. We also have Vicki Williams here, who has actually done that work successfully, and we have it all mapped in Blackboard using EAC visual data, so she can extract some of her data from rubrics and take a look at it. We were wondering, though, how folks did with aligning outcomes and clarifying common ground at each level. Yep. And we probably don't have slides on this or specific examples from folks, because most people found this to be rather challenging and probably need a little bit more time to talk about it.
We did get one example, and I'm going to share the link so that you can view it from, I believe it was UMB for the health service management, or was that UMUC?
I think it's UMUC.
That came in from UMUC, health service management, HMGT 320. I'm going to share that document.
I just shared that out, Sherry.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
So if UMUC, I don't know if the person who did that alignment is on, if they want to talk through that, they'd be willing to do that, that would be great.
And I believe that was Lilia Roberts. So Lilia, I'm going to go and unmute you, just in case you're having any tech issues. Hi Lilia, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, this is Lilia Roberts. I'm the program chair for health service management. We do not see the document I submitted on the screen, but I have it, you know, for me. I don't know if other people can see it. I actually did not find the exercise that challenging, but there are multiple ways to do it, and you can start from the top or from the bottom. So as you can see, the institutional mission has a portion of it that is concerned with serving as a recognized leader in career-relevant education, embracing innovation and change aligned with our purpose, and sharing our perspective and expertise. So then we filter it down to institutional level of learning outcomes, which is concerned with critical analysis, critical reasoning, and problem solving. The program itself has specific outcome identified as identify, analyze, and evaluate quantitative and qualitative healthcare data and information for effective decision-making in various healthcare settings. As you can see, they pretty much echo each other to some degree. Now, then we go down to Health Management 320, which is Fundamentals of Healthcare Management course, and it is a low-level course in the program, but the students already have enough background to understand the functions of management and basics of healthcare. And the course-specific outcome is apply risk analysis, problem-solving, planning, and communication skills to identify and recommend improvements in the quality of healthcare programs. So the assignment was about developing a bow tie analysis for a specific managerial challenging situation. If someone does not know what bow tie analysis is, it's a type of evaluation of the situation, the issues that were leading to it, as well as projection of the solutions and necessary steps that have to happen. So it pretty much is very well aligned with all the outcomes on the top. And then I brought up down here the portions of the rubric dealing with critical thinking and reasoning and with application of concepts and development. It's a little bit involved, but we are trying to motivate students to be really involved in developing their thinking processes, at the same time learning how to apply the content knowledge that they learn in the classroom and to apply it to real life case situations. So bow tie analysis is not actually an imaginary thing. We utilize real managerial issues in real organizations, and it allows them to see immediate application of what they are learning to the real life situations they're going to be solving, which feeds right back into the mission of doing career relevant education and embracing innovation. So please, if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Any questions? Can you hear me?
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate how you gave us some insights into this authentic assessment in terms of how it relates to real world experience so that the students can value the assignment, but also then how it maps back up to the course, the program, the institution, and then up to the mission, which is really the goal of the exercise, is to demonstrate where we have common ground, so that if you were to take these bow tie analysis rubric results and look at those alongside other people in your program, you could do some comparisons, but you could also take that to the institutional level. And one of the things we do at UMBC to foster these kinds of conversations is we have closing the loop discussions where we invite people to come and bring these kinds of results, identify places where there's common ground. So for example, critical thinking, we're all working towards helping students to improve their critical thinking skills. So we can bring those results and look at those together. And we're really hoping that we can do that at the system level as well. Anybody have any questions about this rubric from Health Services Management? Well, then do we have anybody else who wants to share about this process? As these folks told us, it was fairly straightforward for them to create this vertical alignment map. Other folks have reported that they've had some challenges in trying to establish how they have common ground. Would anyone else care to share? All right, so we have a faculty member from UMBC who's going to share with us a little bit about how she started this process. And would you mind just introducing yourself to the group?
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Arevalo Guerrero, and I work for the Modern Language and Linguistics Department and Intercultural Communication. Sorry, I always leave that part. Thank you. So this is actually a little bit of a challenge at the moment for our department, since we are not just covering the language area part of the curriculum, but also the cultural component. So right now we are going through a kind of a change in the program, taking into consideration, hopefully, with my other colleagues here, Ms. Tomoko from the Japanese language area can join me if she wants. Taking into consideration the UMBC mission, definitely all the outcomes in terms of competencies, you know, the 5 that we mentioned before also, the oral and written communication, definitely that's going to be part of the language areas. Not so much the second one, scientific quantitative reasoning. Definitely the third one we just mentioned, critical analysis and reasoning across cultures, and taking that problem-solving approach to real-life situations. Most of the students also are encouraged to go abroad, study abroad programs, and also internships, so that these can also go into not just the reality of the United States, but in a global perspective. The fourth one, technological competency, definitely through the use of the learning mediated systems, and we try to get more innovative in that sense. Depending on the language areas, we use different technologies, especially to develop this communication and oral written language use across campus and in global settings, such as conversation partners with other universities in international settings. And finally, the last one, information literacy, definitely that's what we're targeting. Using authentic material as well as developing an argument, so that students can also link the third one with the fifth, critical thinking, through the information literacy. That's a plus. So as a department, we see that's a big thing, matching all the UMBC mission with these competencies, but throughout the department level, the learning outcomes, program levels across the languages, and then individually from the lower level classes to more advanced courses in the different language areas. And again, we have, I think, up to 11 languages that we use at the moment, we teach at the moment. And definitely having the assessment tool appropriate for each of these competencies and outcomes, it's creating like a massive way of, potential use of technology. But at the moment, it's been challenging, trying to get everybody together on the same boat. And just to mention that we have grad students also as the full lecturer of the class. We also have adjuncts. We have full-time faculty, part-time, full-time lecturers. So this is a big challenge in terms of the faculty that is actually teaching these courses. So if we add all these layers of authenticity for our program assessment, it's going to take a while. But thanks to the Faculty Development Center, we are actually trying to see if we can start working on developing this into a more, let's say, broad context on departmental area, more than just a course by itself.
Great, thank you so much, Elizabeth. We really appreciate you adding insight into the challenges of building common ground. And one of the things that is particularly challenging for her department, the modern languages, MLLI, modern languages and linguistics and intercultural communication, is that they have so many different units, and they need to actually build in another layer of common ground in that hierarchy that we looked at, because they have that departmental layer. So the Japanese group and the Spanish group and the French group and all the other different departments within there, they need to build common ground at another level. So that's a place where they're really working hard and struggling. We also have a representative from the Japanese program here, and in that particular program, it's made up of a great number of adjuncts, and what the coordinator has been able to do is to pull those adjuncts together, brainstorm together about shared outcomes, and really sort of pull those outcomes together. And we've actually been able to program those in Blackboard using EAC visual data. But just keep in mind, those of you who are interested in EAC, it is very limited. It can do a few things, and we're trying to tap into what it does do and push the software vendor to fill in some of those gaps. But so far, no good.
Right. And I think what's important for this piece, for those of you who are thinking about tying this to student success, is we're looking to get some consistency across how they're able to vertically align their learning outcomes, right? So that,
absolutely.
So that then you can look at the student success data more consistently across, right?
Right.
Yes.
And what you may have heard in what Elizabeth was sharing with you about the UMBC functional competencies, you may have heard a common theme in there, because they are the 5 required competencies in COMAR. So those of you who are fans of reading COMAR, you know that those 5 competencies appear in there. So we're pretty sure that the other USM schools are using those in their institutional level learning outcomes.
Right. So I posted a question to those of you who may not have been able to complete this assignment using the tool that Jennifer has developed and doing the vertical alignment process. What strategies are you currently using to map this out in your institution? Is this a new concept? Are there tools that you have in place to support faculty in doing it? We'd like to get an idea of how you're achieving this on your campus.
Right, and if you're looking for the worksheet, you can go to the Faculty Development Center website, and there is a worksheet in there with an example from one of our first-year seminars by Dr. Vicki Williams, where she has mapped out from the rubric level on up, and we actually have this programmed in Blackboard, and we have a number of presentations on this particular work. So if anyone is interested in additional examples, more details, you can contact us about that.
And your willingness to share is kind of what we want to take advantage of the systemness, right? To find out
Right.
best practices that other people are using at their institution.
Exactly. So if anyone in the web audience would like to share, do let us know. We have Sarah Bass here from the UMBC Biology Department, who's prepared to share a little bit about her efforts to work through this vertical alignment process. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah. Thanks so much. You can introduce yourself better.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so I am Sarah Bass. I spoke a little bit last week as well.
A lot last week.
Yeah, and I'm a chemistry faculty member. I teach Gen Chem, which is possibly one of the largest classes on campus.
This is the 800 student class.
Yeah,
right?
so in the fall, right now we have over 800 students in our Chem 101, and then Gen Chem 102. Not as many, but still really large in the spring semester as students move on. So I had actually a little bit of fun with the vertical alignment, just trying to actually, I just finished my first year teaching, and so it's been really nice to try to take a little bit more of an analytical approach to course design, and really consider the intention behind all of the components that we're using and how that fits into the UMBC mission. And so I had it was nice to kind of try to gather the data and learn about what we are using in the department, what are our program level outcomes and student outcomes, and how that maps to my one of the courses that I teach in particular. So I know I mentioned last week that we use ALEX, and so that was kind of my jumping off point, just to think about how it is that we're using ALEX. And so as a reminder, it's an adaptive learning program that our students use. Each student's path that they take through the program is unique to them, which is one of the reasons why we like it. It adapts to students in real time. And then we're able to generate reports, and we use those reports in the course. And so there are two parts of ALEX that kind of three parts. One is, as a prerequisite, they have to complete a large part of their overall pie. And then there's their almost daily ALEX objectives that are due. And then the third part, or the third way we use ALEX, is the overall pie, which is due by the end of the semester. So the ALEX objectives are mapped to our specific learning objectives that we've outlined for our course. And then those feed into the program level student learning outcomes, and then those into the institutional level. And so for our course in particular, this is really heavy on scientific and quantitative reasoning. That's the biggest outcome from Gen Chem. And so I would argue that there is some critical reasoning that we're trying to foster, but as the Gen Chem class, we do have to rely, I think, on some of the higher level courses to really develop those skills. But we're trying to give the basics through their scientific and quantitative reasoning. And so that's the goal in our course design and in our assessment reports, that we really do map to the specific learning objectives that tie to that. So our ALEX objectives also produce and generate reports, which we can use in real time when we then meet with them in the next lecture. So we use then reports generated from their ALEX objectives, which again are due almost daily, so it's 3 times a week, and it's the night before every day of lecture. And then when we're in lecture, we use clickers, so that's another assessment technology that we're using, and we're kind of using both of these together. So use ALEX to get a little bit of a snapshot right before they come into lecture as to where they're at with material. And then we can use our clickers and clicker results in real time. And what we're trying to do is kind of help to close the loop in a sense, because we design questions to help address misconceptions. And so, they work on developing skills in ALEX, and then they come into the classroom, and then in the classroom we're using clickers as another assessment technology, where we, again, help students try to recognize their misconceptions and then continue practicing on the material. So both of these are kind of a similar vertical alignment, but and they work with each other. And then, of course, really the way that we test the overall courses, we do use a standardized final. And so we're able to use those results and map them by semester on how our students are achieving their outcomes.
Oh, great. So you use test mapping, you map it back to the outcomes, and then you pull the data out and figure out where the students are still struggling.
Exactly. And we also do surveys to help better also inform that, to try and see student gains as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate your insights. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah about this vertical alignment effort that she's shared with us? Okay, do we have anyone else who in the webinar audience who would like to share their efforts in vertical alignment? Okay, hearing none, we shall move on. Unless there are any other questions or comments? Okay, the last piece, our last tool, was the rubric that we shared, and it's appearing on the screen now, at least the first portion. And what we challenged you to do was to think about what were some of the gaps in our rubric, what kinds of criterion did we fail to include, and what ideas do you have for improving it? So we looked at usability, and here on the screen you'll see usability and some of the questions that we're thinking about. How well does it work with what we already have? How easy is it for people to use? Does it create additional steps? Does it streamline? Does it make assessment feel like an add-on? And then of course we want to be thinking about the connections, the LTI piece, which we heard a number of people in the webinar really talk about because it's so difficult to create those connections. And then of course we want to think about accessibility for people with different needs. We also looked at functionality, and the best practices in assessment definitely was threaded through the conversation today, is that idea of the real world experience and mapping it right down to an authentic assignment and back up to the mission. So we're really curious to know, can a particular software manage multiple levels of assessment? And we know full well, as most people have shared here today, that they cannot measure. They cannot do that very well. The best thing we found so far is EAC, and as I've mentioned, it's very, very limited. So these are some of the functionality questions. We've really enjoyed hearing about the curriculum mapping software that was shared from UMUC, and we'd be curious to know more about CourseTune and how that helps the instructional designers and folks to think through the mapping process, because the real goal of curriculum mapping is to break down silos and create connections across courses and across programs so that we can see how we're all working together to create holistic student learning. In addition to functionality, we looked at the costs, and this is a recurring theme as everyone is asking and encouraging folks to share, well, how much does this cost, and then where are the hidden costs? Because if you've purchased software, you're all too well aware that hidden costs emerge. Right, Sherry?
Absolutely, and considering the technical support you may need as you do upgrades, there are resources, human resources that manage that software, so making sure you include that in your cost of those resources.
And then the next one is the audiences, or who are the people who need to use the software, what kinds of questions can they ask and answer with these tools, and how are they going to learn to use it? And then of course that comes back to cost, because you typically need someone to train people to use these tools. Additionally, we looked at flexibility. Is it flexible enough? To meet your needs? Can it grow and shift with you? And we really wanted to push the vendors to be thinking about the possibility of adapting to unanticipated needs. In other words, we need some kind of built-in flexibility in the programming so that we can adapt these programs. And like what we saw with UMUC, where they have a number of pilots that they liked and didn't like and were able to continue and not continue, we want to be able to find a program that we can use for the long term that will enable us to meet some of these needs. So your turn. We have some ideas of criterion that we would add here, and we were curious to know, what do folks in the audience see missing from this rubric? What other things do we want to be thinking about at the system level for assessing technology tools?
So we do have one question about functionality. Has anyone used any of these programs for using the assessment results for pedagogical papers describing the classes or programs? If so, which ones have been most helpful?
Well, that's a great question.
On the specific tools, yeah.
Yeah, so Vicki Williams and I, this is Jennifer Harrison speaking, we have published on this, and really the tool that we used the most was Excel. We did export a lot of data from TK20 and look at that for some of the presentations we've done at the Assessment Institute and some of the other assessment conferences. But all of that data had to be massaged using Excel or pulled out using Excel. And for the rubrics, that Dr. Williams uses in her classes, we use Blackboard. So we use Blackboard rubrics and then EAC to pull out certain pieces of data. We use TK20 to pull out different pieces of data, but then we've ultimately used Excel to pull it all together and figure out what does all of this mean. I hope that answered your question. Feel free to give us a follow-up if we didn't get that answered. Any other questions in the chat box, Sherry?
No, not right now.
Is there anyone out there who'd like to go on mic and share a little bit about other ideas about criteria we really want to think about for assessment tools? I'm just open that also up to the studio audience and see if folks have some other suggestions for what we should include. Hearing silence so far sort of suggests that perhaps we've covered all of the criteria.
Here's a comment from Salisbury, and I may ask you to take Mike to add to your comment. But it says, can you prior use, I think you meant, can you add prior use to criteria? Can you go on Mike Salisbury and tell us exactly what you were thinking there?
Did I just talk into this thing here?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure, okay, one of the things I was thinking about is, I'm Wallace Sutherland, Associate Vice President of Student Affairs at Salisbury University, and I'm kind of sort of in charge of assessment and student affairs. And so my thinking was, when we investigate or invest in technology, a common question we ask ourselves is, who else is doing this? Who else is using this? And if that becomes built into the criteria, that'll help institutions take that into account, and maybe we can start getting into a habit at figuring out who else is using what we're thinking about to get some real perspective on utility.
So that might be something we want to add, is especially at the system level, and in the Google Doc, is figuring out who's using it, how does it work. Also, what are those gaps? Because as we all know, the vendors will tell us there are no gaps. We can do this and we can build this, but we all know when we're in using a particular piece of software that just isn't quite true.
Yeah, and I think it's good to explicitly add that. I mean, we do typically talk to our institutional peers when we're getting ready to adopt another type of technology to see what their use has been and their experiences have been. But that would be something, it's good to explicitly add it to the criteria.
Absolutely. In fact, we used to get a lot of questions from folks thinking about adopting EAC visual data, although I think I'm a little too frank with folks and they've stopped listing me as a reference.
Well, the idea team in the chat said they're leaning towards EAC and then using Excel to get their reports out. So.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as I can tell right now, EAC is really just at least one tool where you can connect rubrics and tests across multiple courses. So if you're looking to say you have a multi-section course, or take the example that Sarah Bass gave us earlier, if she was going to do testing in Blackboard and across multiple sections of general chemistry, she could set that up in EAC so that we could pull out data across courses. And that's really what it does. And the other thing it has going for it is it's relatively not that expensive compared to other software. That one I can actually speak to in terms of cost, because we just pay $5,000 a year for that license. And the provost office provides that to the faculty.
I'll mention something here. You know, we talked earlier about the idea that with TK20, for example, that, you know, they say we can do this, we can do that, we can kind of do everything. But in the end, when it comes right down to it, when we're working with the reporting of the data and have to report in a certain way for accreditation and so on, and found, oh, we really need to, you know, have this listed by student and not necessarily by class and so on. And so we ran into roadblocks there. And that seems to be one of the difficulties with assessing some of these tools up front, is that the company will say, we can do it, but unless you can actually run your own data and then generate your own reports and see what you actually get as opposed to just their demos or whatever. And if you really have to know exactly what the end product, and that start from the end kind of backward design thing, I need to know exactly what these reports and these metrics are going to need to be at the end in order to really define how you get there. And that seems to be, I'm just kind of throwing that out there as kind of a criteria, possibly a sort of roadblock, something to keep in mind in terms of assessing these technologies and how these companies kind of want to just say we can do everything, but then when it comes right down to it, unless you get your own data in there, it's very hard to see if it actually works for you or not.
Yeah, those are really great points, and we really appreciate you calling back to our process and the idea of backward design, because really you want to be looking at what kind of reports can come out of these programs, and are they even useful for you, and can they be customized to meet the specific needs. So it's that idea of sort of seeing what it is you want your data to look like at the end. So you're referring to some of the work that you have to do for middle states and accreditation, also some of the reports that you have to turn into MHAC. I don't know if we just did our MFR reports. You probably are all doing that as well. Just the various places where we have to report it, and what does it look like, and how do we pull up the various levels. And that's actually, it's getting to the levels, the program level, institutional level, the course level, and so forth, where we're finding some real difficulties with these softwares, because they can't get down to the granular level, and they can't pull up to the emission level either. So that backward design piece is really important, to have a sense of what it is that you need, what is the specific data you need to provide either to the accreditors, to your faculty, to your deans and other folks, and getting an idea of whether or not that software can actually do that. So thanks so much for your insights. We appreciate it. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, there was one other thing that came into my mind, which is course evaluations. And I recognize that as a separate thing from assessing learning and so on. But it is another area where I think, for example, we're using the TK20 course evaluation tool, and that's the only other one of their tools that we're actually using aside from the competency assessments. But the reporting isn't phenomenal there either, and there's some other functionality that I'd love to see there that would make it more user-friendly for faculty and so on. But I think that's another area where even within UMB, all of the different schools are using their own different system for course evaluation. Some use Blackboard itself and the surveys within it. Some use maybe Qualtrics and different things. And so, I guess it'd be interesting. I know there was a meeting not too long ago that Kerwin helped put on that was about course evaluation and so on. But that's another area that I think would be interesting to, see if there's commonality, shared systems or something, maybe some shared data points or benchmarking that could happen on certain metrics across different institutions and so on, that could be very interesting.
Yeah, I know the initiative that you're talking about, and I know that UMUC was interested in seeing what other institutions were doing with regard to that. Nancy, I think you could probably speak to where that initiative is with regard to the course evaluations. Nancy is there. Well, maybe she can address that.
Sorry,
one.
I was unmuting myself. I think we can certainly go back to that group that we had been in touch with before and see what some more concrete next steps are. I thought it was useful to have the conversation that we had and begin to sort of compare notes, but I will certainly take this recommendation back to MJ.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Any other comments, or we can move on if anybody wants to add to the rubric for assessing technology tools? If there are any other comments on that?
Let's see. We do have a comment from Kimberly Miller. Important aspects of functionality that should be evaluated. is if there is access to the end user who is reviewing assessment reports of the tool. If they can drill down to the raw data easily to answer any analysis questions, this may highlight any possible data integrity issues. And I don't know, Kimberly, if you want to go on mic and give a little explanation or background to that.
Certainly. I was just thinking about, if the tool does not offer customized reports the way we need it, can it drill down to the raw data? My big thing is, I think, when we're looking at assessment of student learning outcomes, there can be variability in the data or some anomalies that need to be pointed or could skew results. So I think data integrity is an important issue, especially when it comes to technology, how the data is pulled out of the technology, and then how is it presented to the end user. I also did highlight, some added questions around, some thoughts around customization of the assessment technology. And I think it's important to ask if the technology taxonomy does match the institutional language of assessment. And then how flexible is that technology to develop the reports, the customized reports that you need? Those are just some additional thoughts. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks so much for reminding folks that we need software that aligns to our institutional assessment plan, software that supports the way that we've organized our assessment processes.
So this is a great follow-up question from Towson. Has any institution been successful with using technology to align assessment of core curriculum learning outcomes, which goes across programs with vertical learning outcome alignment that integrates assessment information through specific programs or departments?
So I could speak to UMBC while the rest of you think about that, because we've done this for our Gen Ed program, where we have aligned all of our outcomes across all of the courses in the general education program. And you may be able to guess what program we use for that. It's Excel. It's on the Faculty Development Center website if anyone wants to take a look at it. But what it does is enables us to, we actually did it to demonstrate to middle states how our general education program was helping students to build foundational skills in all 5 of the functional competencies or the institutional learning outcomes that UMBC works to achieve. Anybody else care to share about that? Is anybody else successfully able to align and connect all of these across multiple programs?
Yeah. Yes. So what technologies are used to align assessment of core curriculum learning outcomes, which goes across programs with vertical learning outcome alignment that integrates assessment?
Oh, yeah. So that's a good place for us to talk about a term that we made up at UMBC. It's narrative aggregation, where we found that when we go to our Council of Deans, so we have what's called a closing the loop report, or biennial reports, where people are supposed to be reporting on their learning outcomes and sharing data. Those are all in Word. And then when the Council of Deans comes together to look at those, what they do is they pull those up. They can't do it through technology, so there's no aggregation of data across multiple courses. They read through all of those reports and then connect those stories by hand and human brain into what we call narrative aggregation, or aggregating the collective story of student learning across programs and into a story of how well students are learning across an entire college. And then we bring, the Council of Deans bring those to the provost and share those with the provost and the other vice presidents, and then they have discussions, and then we try to aggregate that at the institutional level. And this is kind of what we're pushing back against, because we would like to have the data to go with the narrative.
Right. This is a stopgap solution, right? Until you get one that actually can incorporate the data.
And so Middle States took that from us as an institution, as we said, yes, we're doing this work, but we anticipate in the future, as we see the accreditors sort of being pushed harder by the Department of Education, and then in turn pushing us as institutions a lot harder to have a more nuanced data collection system. And then I really appreciated that comment about data integrity, because we really need to be thinking about how is the information pulled out, how is it presented, how is it connected, how does it roll up to the mission, and once we get that data at the mission level, is it valid, accurate, and useful? And where did it come from?
I have a comment in the room.
Oh, great. We have a question from Will you introduce yourself?
And you might need to come forward so they can hear you.
Yeah, the mic is up here.
I'm Tomoko Fugenboom. I'm teaching Japanese at UMBC. We've been talking about a lot of math reports, and I'm just going it down to the micro size, and then just want to see the individual student learning in progress. But I'm not sure it will go with the security and the privacy issues. But I'd like to see as a course level, it's like to see, because our program is smaller, so I can just do, well, we are thinking about more like an individual learning process and then what they achieve and stuff like that, and what kind of things they needed for individuality. So is that kind of hard to export as a report because of the privacy issue, or is that okay to do it?
So that's a tough question. I really appreciate it, Tomoko, in terms of the individual students' ability to move across courses and collect data. Of course, we have some federal limitations on this. I don't recall exactly what the law is at the moment, but there are some limitations. Elizabeth Warren has a proposal out there at this time to sort of make some changes in that law. But at this time, we have some limitations about the individual student records because of privacy and so forth. But to directly answer Tomoko's question in terms of the software that she's using, she uses Blackboard, she uses Blackboard Rubrics, she has the Japanese program level learning outcomes already programmed into Blackboard and EAC, so she can pull that data up. And then that program does give you some student level data so that you can sort of track students across. But what I actually hear her asking is, how can we empower students to see their progress through this course and then across courses? How can we make this software work for the students so that they can see which of the institutional level learning outcomes have I achieved so far? Which ones am I still working towards? Which courses are going to help me to really, let's say I'm struggling with my oral communication skills, which courses would help me to sort of amp those skills up and take me up to the benchmark for the institution? And is that right? Is that kind of what I hear you asking? So she's saying, yeah, she probably can't hear it because she's away from the microphone at the moment. And that's a real challenge. Of course, we have the federal law to deal with. But we're working within that law. We have some software like EAC and Blackboard. Blackboard Analytics and the tools within Blackboard allow you to sort of dig in to see how involved students are, how often they're using the tools and what they're doing in Blackboard, and then the rubric data gives you some ideas about how well they're achieving the learning outcomes in the course. But we don't have an overall software system that enables students to see how are they doing from course to course to course to course.
What do you mean by how?
Like if they want to track their progress and how well they've achieved each of the institutional level learning outcomes. John, did you want to add to that? Because I know you're working in the Blackboard Analytics and so forth and the clickstream data. Did you want to add to that?
I'm not sure if you want me to open a can of worms. I guess the comment I would say is we keep talking about the failing of vendors to provide something we want to buy, and we've reached the point where we need to build.
Right.
And if we're at the point to build, could we all, as a system, come up with a data set of what we're looking for?
That's a great segue, John. It's as if we planted you in the audience.
And by the way, you were hearing from John Fritz,
yes.
UMBC's vice president.
So
Yes.
So the actual next steps that we have, if we're done talking about criteria, was to kind of open up some discussion about how we move forward as a system. And if you go to the Google Doc that was shared, we've got a few starting things to consider. Common tool sets, whether it's something we can purchase or we can build as a system. What common questions do we have about student learning and student success? Obviously, we all have to do certain reports, and it would be good to make sure we're consistent in what we're looking at and knowing what data points we need to be able to answer those questions that are related to student learning and student success and how you integrate that information. And then the last point is System level working group. If we were to have a system level working group, what kind of things would we want to examine? And so Nancy, I don't know if you want to weigh in at all at this point, but these are kind of things that we're thinking about. And then there's a section down below, other outstanding questions. And we did have a question earlier about how our campus is addressing the overarching connectedness of these different solutions, and how, and we talked last time about how did you actually look at these learning outcome data that we've really looked at a lot today, and take that and combine it with the student success data that we have, looking at indirect measures of graduation and retention and how long it takes students to get out of their programs, those kind of things.
Exactly. Yes, and that's all one of the things that we need to do as a system as well, is look at those different data sets and how do we bring those together to ask more nuanced questions about student learning. And it's also an inclusive excellence initiative as well, because it gives us the opportunity to dig in and find out if there are little pockets of or little groups within our institutions that are struggling with specific things. Then we as educators can drill down to those, identify those needs, create interventions that can support those folks and lift them up to successful.
That's great. And then so someone in the chat has written basically what John was saying. Was that you, John? Oh, okay.
I thought I was just going to be surreptitiously and put it in there. And then you called me out. So.
Okay, so what we really like for folks to do is engage in that Google Doc so that we can start to capture some of these things, so we can figure out what the next steps that we should take as a system are. So I'm going to actually get out of here and go to the doc so we can see the tracking.
It should be linked right there in the.
Yeah, let's see if that well, I don't put it back in.
And this is Nancy. I put the link back at the bottom of the chat for everyone. And I mean, I do, Jen, just in your comment about inclusive excellence, I really do see this as a direct student success effort. So I'm happy to, you know, on behalf of the Kerwin Center, to say that we'd be happy to convene a working group and sort of set a charge for ourselves as a group and come up with some priorities and roll up our sleeves.
Great. So, for example, the first area says common tool sets. We're not necessarily looking for the name of a tool, but you know, what are some of the capabilities you need that tool set to have would be fine. And then we can always go through the exercise of mapping and looking through the taxonomy to figure out tools that have those capabilities.
Right.
Someone has a question. Let's see. And someone send the UMBC link to the Excel spreadsheet of Gen Ed and institutional learning outcomes. I think that.
Yeah, we can include that later.
We can include that in this document later.
Sure.
So we'd like to see all of you get that Google Doc and start helping us fill out. What are some of the common questions that you have about student learning and student success? So what we need to define is what the questions are, what the use cases are, so that we can identify the data sets associated with providing that information, and then look at tools that can support that. So we're going to
get. And I think also importantly, just Sherry, I would add, there's that you put down at the bottom of the document points of contact, and so that would be the group that we would start to convene. So if you want to be part of a working group, at least maybe an initial call or webinar that we can just sort of figure out if we want an individual point person or if we want a group-based process from each institution. If you want to be part of a next step to sort of figure out our working group, then please feel free to put your name down.
So we'll give folks a few minutes to help to populate the document. We can talk through that after we give you a few minutes to add your own comments or insights. We're going to go on mute here for a moment. Let's just take a couple more minutes with this exercise. Oh, are you muted? Is everybody muted if you're on the webinar? If you got kicked out? Okay. I just want to make sure so we don't get feedback. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this part of the exercise. I don't know why we're getting feedback. Just ask everyone to go back on mute if we could. So we recognize that it may be that there are people who at your institutions might be involved in answering some of these questions, but they may not be participating in the webinar today. So we ask you to share this document with them and ask them to add some of their thoughts and ideas. And as a follow-up, as Nancy said, we can send out a charge to those of you who participated in the webinar to see if there are perhaps other people at your institution who may be interested in continuing this work. We know that you all are looking at questions around student learning and student success, and it may be that the folks who are involved in those processes aren't here, but we're really interested in finding out some of the use cases that people have and who their stakeholders are and what kind of questions they're trying to answer for those stakeholders.
Right, because Sherry and I are working on putting together presentations for both the Assessment Institute and EDUCAUSE, where we look at connecting student learning and student success.
Right.
And putting together a dashboard, and don't get too excited, because by dashboard we mean sort of what are the key questions we want to ask, where are the sources of data for those questions, to move towards what we envision as like an actual real-time dashboard where we could actually see these data as they emerge from day to day at an institution. And I think, as we all realize, we're not there yet, or the technologies are not there yet to make that possible for us.
Right. There was a question in the chat about everyone in this group being part of one of the Basecamp groups. I guess that's something we can take back to Nancy and Fiona with regard to the Kerwin Basecamp instance. Maybe we can set up a project around this work so that we have these documents to share.
Yeah, Basecamp could become part of our taxonomy in terms of communicating and connecting across institutions of the system.
Right.
There you go. We can certainly do that.
And Clark, I'm not really sure what your comment is here. Do you want to get on mic and say what are you just indicating the groups that you're already in on Basecamp?
Yeah. I was just listing the projects that I was in. I wasn't sure if any of those cover everybody here, or if there are other projects that are in there that I'm not in, that cover everyone here, or what was going on.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it would be appropriate to set up another project.
Yeah, it's a good question, because we use it for the First in the World project, but I don't know about where else it's used.
I think it's probably an intersecting group with some other either working groups or projects. And so, but we can set up our own. We can invite everyone who registered for the webinar, and then if folks decide they don't want to be part of it, they can they can exit.
And if we look down, if you scroll down the document, we see we at least have 4 people on the potential committee in the future. And so if you don't want to volunteer for the committee, you could volunteer someone else to be on that list if you'd like to add some suggested folks that might enrich that conversation in the future.
And we'll count on Fiona and Nancy to send out a follow-up so that we can, for folks who might not be on the call today, if they're interested, they can let us know.
And I know that, everyone's going to balance their interest in this topic with just the realities of time and the number of committees and things that they're already on. But we can decide for ourselves how a group might proceed, how often they might talk to each other. It may be that we do a small working group that sort of does some more regular meetings leading up to a larger event or activity that could, again, cast a wider net and have more people come in, but, save that wider group of folks in time, but still having to be connected.
Yes, and thanks to Fiona for adding the documents that were shared from the webinar last week, also as part of the Google Docs. So if you weren't here, the handouts are there now, and the other papers that we referenced in the first part of the webinar have been added.
Right.
So that's helpful.
And did we tell them already we added the gen ed example?
Yes, and I did in the text. I did mention in the text in the chat that that Jennifer did add the link to the Excel spreadsheet that has the general education example. So that is also at the bottom of this document. If there are no other questions, we're going to ask one last call out to anyone else in the audience who has questions or comments. We'll let Nancy close it out. It's been a pleasure working with you guys over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And we also want to thank those folks who came to the EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative in January and came and viewed our initial poster on this topic and gave us lots of feedback. And they also asked us to go back to the system, go back to Nancy and MJ and say, hey, we need to take this to the system level. We need to create this discussion. So those folks really inspired us to sort of push a little harder and bring this webinar together and share it with you. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks everyone in our studio audience. And we appreciate your questions and your comments, and especially really appreciate your insights about moving this project forward.
And Nancy, we're passing it back to you.
I can only echo all of those sentiments and say that we will collect all this information and start out with creating a base camp. We can link to the school doc right in that. And then Sherry and Jen, we might circle back with you to do some debriefing and then put out a call for at least an initial meeting to sort of see how we might want to organize ourselves going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nancy. And thank you, Nancy and Fiona, for setting this up and walking us through the technical difficulties and making sure everybody has the handouts and leading us in this initiative. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
And thank you both, Sherry and Jen, for all the work and time you've put into the planning and the delivery of these webinars. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nancy. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And we look forward to seeing you as part of this future collaborative group across the system.
Here, here. All right, goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks.